It's interesting, this morning on Squawk Box, they had the CEO of Career Builder on, and he was commenting on where he was seeing jobs being posted and growth, and healthcare was a big part of that conversation. So,
yeah.
So particularly in the sales side of healthcare, it was interesting, a lot of jobs being created. So, Brenda, you got any thoughts on this, or?
I definitely think rate is coming back. We certainly didn't have any issues with raising rates on our population that were our residents, current residents, but I think there was a lot of discounting, a lot of pressure for move-ins, as I think some companies got a little bit more excited about occupancy and the pressure on occupancy. We also opened 2 communities in 2008. One filled up, as Marilyn said, ahead of underwriting, did fine. The other was in an area that was a resort area that was undergoing a huge housing boom before September of 2008. Right. And everything just stopped. And so we kind of got frozen in time for about a year there, and we're now seeing it pick up significantly again. So I think we're all seeing the market improve. I think we all are glad to be here and have gotten through it, because I think it was a nervous time for the whole country, not just our industry.
Okay.
I think, Pat, one of the things on the rates that we've seen is as many of us go out and develop memory care and add more memory care capacity to our portfolios, we've been here long enough to be pretty clear with levels of care and assisted living and how that functions, and we've seen a lot of experimentation and variety of pricing models with memory care, particularly in the recession, some all-inclusive strategies with memory care, some with levels of care in memory care, and I think that's continuing to flush itself out, and there's really not a standard for that at this point, and that's part of the excitement of it, is there's a lot of creativity and options available to the consumers.
I think that's right.
I think we all saw that our Alzheimer's units were full all the time, no matter what was going on in the economy, and we continue to see that. So that just supports that. The more they need our services, clearly, the better we're going to operate in any kind of a recessionary period.
Let me segue then from that comment, Brenda, to this sort of broad question for all of you. I have 2 or 3 thoughts running through my head. We've got, and it's about the regulatory environment that you see us living in, and frankly having to meet newer regulatory issues. What's going through my head right now is with this growth in Alzheimer's and memory care need. Obviously, the nature of our client and patient has changed. I was in a conversation yesterday about an aggressive resident in a particular community, and how we meet those needs and how we staff and supervise to meet those needs. Brenda, you and Patricia Will, who I think is here this morning, appeared before the U.S. Senate Committee on Aging in the last month or so, and had a conversation with those folks about what we perceive, I'll speak for myself, as no need at the federal level yet for a national, yet or forever perhaps, for a federal regulatory model, and to let percolate and continue this state regulatory model that we mostly operate in today. There are small Medicaid waiver programs in place in some states as we move across the country, but and I think there was a conversation yesterday in some of the panels about how the nature of our resident has changed over the last 10 years. At the regulatory panel I attended, I was sitting in the back and I saw almost every head in the room nod when somebody on the panel said that the independent living resident today is very different from what the IL resident was 10 years ago, and then frankly the AL resident today 10 or 15 years ago was generally in a long-term custodial care setting. And today they want to live in a residential model, which means we have to be equipped to meet their needs. So what do you see happening on a regulatory front? We've obviously had some vigorous state-level debates, Pennsylvania for one, Georgia's going through some legislative changes right now. What are you seeing in terms of state regulatory environments currently, and where do you think that's going, and where should it go over the next several years?
I actually think we're in an area of great opportunity at this moment. I think that first of all, ALFA has done a fantastic job in getting us before the decision makers certainly on the federal level, and has done a great job in working with states, but in a lot of cases in a crisis mode. We've had to go into Pennsylvania, go into Georgia, go into Texas, when we're threatened by some kind of regulation or legislation that's harmful to our industry. And I think it's time for us to go on the offense rather than always playing defense. Regulators usually move forward with regulation that they think protects the consumer against something that we're doing. And they have no context. They hear about a bad situation and they immediately do what they do. They try to overregulate it. And I think if we spend more time educating, and that's certainly what the advocacy day, the fly-in advocacy day is, that ALFA does, but do take more time to educate regulators before there's a crisis. We have an opportunity to change the kind of paradigm that we're caught in. And I know there were regulators here yesterday, and on the Senate committee panel that Patricia and I participated in, there were 5 regulators there talking about what their states are doing. And if we have the opportunity to work on the state level, and all of us, I think, participate in some degree in our state associations, but I don't think to the degree that we need to. And I almost think that those of us up here and other leaders in the industry need to man a wall, as I say, in the state. You need to be there participating. I haven't participated in our state association. I get all the materials and whatever, but haven't attended anything for probably 10 years. Next month, I'm speaking at the state association because, we had a scare in New Jersey with some legislation, and all of a sudden, we have to go into defensive mode, and we were able to do what we needed to do. But it shouldn't be like that, because you're talking to them and you're going, why would you think that you need to do this? But you're playing catch up. And so we want to, I think, get ahead of that and let the regulators know that what we do is also in the interest of our residents, and that we should have more of a partnership for good legislation on a state level rather than be at odds with each other. And the only way that we effectively defend against federal legislation is to have strong, effective state legislation. So I think we need to invest ourselves more in that.
Yeah, I think just hitchhiking, Brenda, on that, I think that's, you're speaking to the choir here. We need to be more involved in our state associations, and we need to get all of our, not only our key leadership, but our executive managers involved. And I think one of the things that we learned when we went to Washington, D.C. this year at the fly-in, and I encourage everybody, if you have somebody in your organization that could attend next year, it's a great opportunity for us to have our voice heard. And what we need to do at our state level is the same thing. We need to go encourage our representatives to come out to our communities, bring them out for a cup of coffee or a lunch or just a walk through, and let them experience and see the life enrichment that's going on, to see the communities, to talk to some of your folks in the communities, because otherwise they live in a different world. And I think that hit me this year more so than ever in Washington, D.C., where when we did get to speak to some of these key staffers and even a couple of the senators and legislators, they really don't have a grasp, a really good understanding, for the most part, I'm generalizing, but for the most part, on assisted living and what the model is about and what we're trying to provide for these wonderful, 85-year-olds. So just an encouragement to get more involved. And we need to do that as well.
Marilyn?
I think it's also this issue, I think Brenda's dead on, but I think this trend that a lot of us are seeing towards higher acuity is really related to this, because I think we've got to, there's, at least I know in our company, and I imagine in others, partly because of what's gone on in the economy, I'm concerned there's been a little bit of a drift to just say, okay, well, it's higher acuity and that's what we are. And I think to some degree, the more we get to the line of, should this person be in assisted living or should they go to skilled nursing, we potentially could draw more focus and interest from the regulators. And I think it's just something as an industry we've got to really think hard about. And it's difficult to be very black and white about where that line is, but I think it's an important issue that has potential to affect regulatory focus on our industry.
I think back in, if I remember back in 1990, when we started, there were only 1 or 2 states that even had a licensure category for assisted living. And many states that we went into, and many of you other that were there in those years, actually helped go out and proactively lobby and bring the legislators into your communities and actually from a proactive standpoint help draft some of the regulations and licensure categories that actually allow us to operate separate from skilled nursing in many of the states. But I agree with the other panelists that if we allow the acuity to continue to increase and morph and become more and more like a nursing home, will be less and less like assisted living as it was started and as the movement began. And I think there's maybe a category in between. Many states now have dual licensure for assisted living based on acuity. And I think there's a great benefit in us continuing to define what we are and to define what assisted living is in and of itself, and then perhaps develop another licensure category for Todd and I were talking yesterday about transitional care that might be this bridge between assisted living and skilled nursing, so that the foundation of assisted living regulations don't become drafted around the highest acuity resident at any assisted living property in the United States, because that's where it will get driven because of some incidents that will happen, some problems that will occur in that setting. There will be this reaction to that. And I would encourage all of you to take part in the legislative days in your local states. ALFA does do a tremendous job on the federal level and state participation and being proactive with legislation, but it's always, every effort I've ever been a part of legislatively, in spite of what all of the lobbyists may do to sway and influence legislators, there is no impact greater than grassroots. The constituencies and their voters come in and visit with them, and sometimes it doesn't matter what the last lobbyist said. So be a part of that and take an active part in helping to guide who we are.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I'll echo one thing that Brenda said, and that would urge everybody in this room. It's really important, and I'm as guilty of it. Brenda, you were talking about how you'd been guilty of it. You know, we have a tendency to come to the national conferences and participate in these things, but in no manner am I denigrating ALFA's importance, but at the state level, if you're not engaged and your company is not on the board of your state affiliate or your state chapter, you are missing a huge opportunity. We've been guilty of it in my own company where we've had issues come up and we're not on the board of Georgia ALFA, or we're not participating in X, Y, or Z state, and we should be. And I mean, I lived that in the vigorous debates that we all participated in Pennsylvania last year, and we got engaged in Georgia where we had not been before, and some other states in which we operate, but we're missing a huge opportunity. And just strategically, Brenda and I and some others participated in a strategic planning workshop for ALFA for the next 5 years, and part of our core strategy at ALFA is not only to continue the vigorous federal advocacy, because those issues matter, whether it's a labor issue or a regulatory issue or whatever the federal issue might be, but most of the game is at the state level, and ALFA is going to redouble its efforts to help build stronger state organizations, but that can only be done if you take the time. And a lot of us, because we're so focused on occupancy and sales and quality of services and all the day-to-day stuff that is our business, this is equally important stuff, and we all need to engage in it. So that's my 30-second public service announcement on that. Let me shift gears. We had a great expo downstairs. Most of you, I'm sure, walked and met lots of folks and walked those aisles, and they were full of all kinds of technology that is doing all kinds of things, everything from software programs to help you close your books faster and give you more accurate accounting and be able to drill down into cost centers in your business on the financial side, but a lot of really interesting stuff that my own theory is going to be required of us to build brands and to build great customer service in terms of how technology is used to make the lives of our residents better and their family members, their adult children better, and how they interact with our communities. So